The explosive story begins in Batgun City, where everyone had gathered. The atmosphere was filled with sorrow because their Supreme Father had been killed. People from all over the city had gathered for his funeral as he was highly respected. The body of the Supreme Father was brought into the church, and his tomb was buried with great honor. But now, the biggest problem was who would become the new Supreme Father of the large church. To decide this, 4 candidates were chosen by the citizens, and one of them would be selected as the new Supreme Father. But for the time being, a man named Robert was given the responsibility of handling the church's affairs. Robert worked as a government agent and was very responsible. However, a decision had to be made soon about who among the 4 would become the new Supreme Father. At this point, we are shown a large laboratory where 2 scientists, Sylvan and Betra, were working tirelessly on their Antimatter project. They had 3 magical cubes that were assisting them in creating antimatter. But then, Betra noticed a malfunction in their system. She immediately went to check the area where the antimatter cubes were stored. When she opened the main system, she found that one of the cubes was missing. It wasn't there at all, which caused the entire circulation system to come to a halt. Betra rushed to her senior scientist, Sylvan, but when she arrived, she saw that Sylvan had been killed. His eyes had been gouged out because the person who had stolen the antimatter cube had scanned Sylvan's retina, which was now the only clue. This event left their project completely stalled. It seemed that someone had stolen the antimatter to execute a larger plan. If used incorrectly, the explosion caused by this antimatter could be more powerful than a nuclear bomb. Next, we see Robert swimming when a government agent approaches him. The agent shows Robert a strange symbol, one that belongs to the Illuminati. Robert, after examining the symbols, comments that it's from an ancient civilization that had disappeared many years ago. But upon seeing the Illuminati symbol, it became clear that it had been created recently, suggesting that all the members of the Illuminati might be regrouping. The government agent shared several things with Robert, explaining how high-ranking individuals were being killed, likely by a large and powerful gang. They also received news that the 4 candidates selected as potential Supreme Fathers were also being targeted for assassination. This information reached the highest levels of authority, prompting Robert to decide to help them. Robert and the government agent boarded a helicopter and went to their main headquarters, where they began their investigation. They started piecing together evidence and concluded that the same group responsible for the theft was also behind the killings. Meanwhile, the election for the new Supreme Leader was about to take place, with the 4 candidates standing for selection. The process was in full swing, and Robert was brought to the venue to carry out a very difficult mission. Robert was introduced to an officer named Olivet, the head of their Swiss Guard company. The Swiss Guard was an organization tasked with protecting the Supreme Fathers and the entire clergy community. They were equipped with a variety of weapons and soldiers who were ready to sacrifice their lives for the protection of the Fathers. The commander of the facility called everyone together to brief them about the mission. Shockingly, Betra, the same scientist from the laboratory, was also present. She had a valid point to raise with the team. Betra began explaining to the commander and others how one of the antimatter cubes had been stolen from their company. She shared detailed information about how dangerous it could be. Antimatter had the potential to cause explosions more powerful than nuclear bombs. Betra further explained that the antimatter cube had electrodes on both ends, which would detach once the battery was drained. This detachment would trigger a reaction that could result in a massive explosion, potentially affecting an area spanning several kilometers. The commander and Olivet received a video sent by the thieves themselves, adding another layer of urgency to the mission. The thieves declared in the video that they would destroy everything, including the church, which was a symbol of hope for all people. Their plan was to obliterate it, shattering people's faith in God. Once that was accomplished, it would clear the way for the Illuminati to carry out their agenda unopposed, re-establishing their organization with ease. It became evident that the Illuminati themselves were behind all of this. They were the ones who killed the Supreme Father, and now they were plotting to kill the 4 candidates, the 4 pillars. The commander and Olivet were deeply shocked, unsure of what to do in such a dire situation. It seemed that no father was safe anymore, and even the soldiers of the Swiss Guard were terrified at the mere mention of the Illuminati. That's when Robert stepped in, explaining that they needed to focus on the patterns in the clues the thieves had provided in the video. By following those clues, they could rescue the fathers one by one. Robert shared more insight about the Illuminati's methods. He explained that when the Illuminati existed centuries ago, they didn't just kill their targets directly. Instead, they used mysterious and symbolic methods that everyone would recognize, giving their adversaries a chance to stop them. However, their riddles were so complex that no ordinary person could solve them in time. Robert emphasized that if they could decode these signs, they might be able to save the 4 candidates. To unravel the clues, Robert requested access to an ancient library in Vatican City, which held historical records that could help them understand the Illuminati's patterns. However, the commander refused, for reasons he wouldn't disclose. With these restrictions placed on him, Robert found himself at a standstill. Still, he resolved not to give up. He understood that if the Illuminati regained power, they would never back down. Unwilling to accept defeat, Robert sought out Father Mina, who was known for efficiently managing the church's operations. After explaining the entire situation, Robert convinced Father Mina of the urgency of the matter. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Father Mina granted Robert permission to access the library. This library held many secrets about the Illuminati, and the gang members were working according to those very records. Father Mina instructed Petra to bring him the notebook in which Sylve, her colleague, used to document all his projects. Petra promised to do so and immediately set out with Robert. Together, they headed to the ancient library, hoping to find clues. As they made their way, Petra told Robert that finding the first clue could lead them to the thieves since they were likely working for the Illuminati. She also mentioned that if anyone got hold of the antimatter box, they should completely destroy the electrodes attached to it. This would ensure the battery never depletes, preventing an explosion. Robert and Petra arrived at the library, where Robert explained they needed to find a very old book by Galileo. He believed the book might contain clues, as Galileo had once been associated with the Illuminati. Meanwhile, the story cut to the dangerous thief who had stolen the antimatter cube. He was seen sending a message from his laptop, informing someone that the task was complete. He immediately received a reply confirming his payment and permission to proceed. This revealed that the thief was working for someone else, a mastermind managing an extensive gang at a higher level. Capturing the key member would not be easy. Robert and Petra managed to locate Galileo's book in the library. However, even after thoroughly reading it, they couldn't find any clues. That's when they realized that if the clues had been so easy to find, the Illuminati wouldn't have been as cunning as they were. Using a magnifying glass, they directed light onto the pages, revealing hidden Illuminati symbols and several other clues they could follow. The first clue pointed them to a very old church where the body of a historical figure, Father Raphael, had been buried. Believing this church to be the potential site of an explosion, Robert and Petra rushed there. Upon reaching the church, they began to suspect that an attack was imminent. They entered the church to investigate further. Robert and Petra found what they thought was Raphael's tomb, but they later discovered that the real body of Raphael had been relocated long ago. Confused, Robert approached a guide at the site to ask where Raphael's actual tomb was. The guide provided all the necessary details, and following the instructions, Robert and Petra left the area to continue their investigation. Meanwhile, at the location where the vote to elect the new Supreme Father was about to take place, Father Macon was urging the senior members to evacuate Vatican City. She warned them about the impending attack by the Illuminati and the threat posed by the antimatter bomb, which could be planted anywhere. However, the senior fathers refused to panic. They insisted that the enemies were only trying to scare them and that they must face the threat without fear. Ignoring her warnings, they decided to proceed with the voting process. Frustrated and with no other options, Father Macon left the meeting. Back with Robert, the commander confronted him, accusing him of spreading false rumors and acting illegally. The commander believed Robert's actions were disruptive and harmful. However, neither Robert nor Petra paid any attention to the accusations. They teamed up with Olivet and a few officers to follow the clues they had discovered because the 4 candidates' lives were in imminent danger. They knew the Illuminati could strike at any time. Following the clues provided by the guide, Robert and Petra arrived at an old location where people used to come to pray for Father Raphael. Investigating the site further, they found the first clue confirmed. They opened an area that revealed a hidden basement. As they descended into the basement, they discovered a horrifying sight. The first candidate's body was half buried in the ground. Strange markings were carved into the body, which were clearly the work of the Illuminati. The candidate had been brutally killed, and wild animals were feeding on the remains. The smell from the body was now unbearable. Meanwhile, all the fathers gathered in the assembly hall had no idea that the lives of the 4 candidates were in danger. They were busy casting their votes, while outside, everyone was eagerly awaiting the election of the new Supreme Father. The commander and several others arrived at the scene where they began investigating the first candidate's body. They found many clues on the body, pointing towards the second candidate as the next target. Robert noticed a statue nearby, with its hand pointing in a completely different direction. He suspected that this could be another clue to find the second candidate, so he immediately headed in that direction with his team. As they moved along, they realized the direction pointed to a church in St. Petersburg. They rushed there, knowing they might find the next clue. After searching the vast area of the church, Robert and Bertra discovered the second clue, confirming that the second candidate would be killed there. As soon as the clock struck 12 o'clock, a woman screamed loudly after noticing blood on the ground. When everyone rushed to the spot, they found that the second candidate's lungs had been punctured, and they had been attacked. The candidate lost consciousness, and despite Bertra's efforts to revive him, it was too late. The candidate had already passed away. The crowd gathered to witness the tragic scene, but by now, it was too late. Among the crowd, the killer, a member of the Illuminati, was seen. He had been the one to murder the second candidate. The commander finally understood that Robert and Bertra were not wrong. After the deaths of two candidates, only two remained, and their protection was now paramount. As Robert examined the second candidate's body, he discovered a letter inside it. Upon reading the letter, it was clear that the supreme leader, who had just been killed, had not died naturally but had been murdered. The murder was exceptionally sinister, and when Father McKenna and several others learned about it, they couldn't believe it. According to them, the supreme leader's death had been natural. However, the letter revealed a shocking truth. The supreme leader suffered from a heart condition and had been prescribed a peculiar medication to manage it. An overdose of this medication had caused his heart to stop, leading to his death. Father McKenna insisted that this information must not be leaked, as it could shatter the people's trust in them. He gave Robert full authority to investigate and find the Illuminati members, emphasizing the urgent need to capture them and protect the remaining two candidates. Robert, along with Professor Olivet, set out to locate the third candidate and ensure their safety. Meanwhile, Bertra stayed behind with Father McKenna, reviewing the notes of her senior officer, Sylvan, hoping to uncover more clues. Robert ventured into the archives of a massive organization known as Archivum, where numerous records related to the Illuminati were stored. He began combing through books and documents, looking for any lead that could bring him closer to the Illuminati and their members. As Robert discovered a critical clue, the electricity in the archives suddenly failed. The oxygen levels began to drop drastically, leaving everyone trapped. Desperately trying to escape, Robert pushed a heavy bookshelf onto a glass panel, shattering it. The broken glass allowed fresh air to circulate, restoring the oxygen levels and stabilizing the situation. Soon after, the electricity was restored. Meanwhile, Bertra and Father McKenna were continuing their search for the antimatter device, knowing it had to be located quickly to prevent a catastrophic explosion. For now, the Supreme Leader's body was kept under observation. The investigators needed to confirm whether his death was an accident or a calculated murder. Upon examining the Supreme Leader's body, they noticed it had turned completely black, confirming the overdose theory. It was now evident that his death was not a natural occurrence but a deliberate act of murder orchestrated with chilling precision. Both of them were shocked because what they had considered a joke, the Illuminati members had actually done. It was them who had killed the Supreme Leader. But how was this possible, as the Supreme Leader had very high security? Father McKenna thought that some members of the Illuminati could be within their own organization, and they needed to find out as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Robert had gathered some clues and believed he could save the third candidate. So, he quickly got in a car with his team and headed to the location. Father McKenna quickly reached the place where the voting was happening and tried to convince the leaders that the situation had escalated. She told them they needed to stop the voting because some members of the Illuminati were among them, and they could eliminate everyone to re-establish their organization. Father McKenna suggested that they evacuate the city to prevent any possible bomb blasts and ensure the Illuminati members couldn't attack any of the leaders. Meanwhile, Robert reached a large castle where the third candidate was being burned alive. Robert and his team rushed to save the candidate, but an Illuminati member arrived and started attacking them from behind. He even killed the third candidate, who fell into the fire and perished. Robert tried to save him, but he couldn't, and the Illuminati member managed to escape. On the other side, Father McKenna and the voting leaders realized that 3 candidates had been killed. They decided to run for the position themselves, as they too wanted to become the Supreme Father. Father McKenna realized that something bigger was happening and that these leaders might be secretly connected to the Illuminati, all aiming to take control of the city and rule over it. All the rescuers quickly got Robert out of that place. Robert began to think deeply about how the Illuminati would target the final candidate. He took out a map and started analyzing the pattern of the murders of the first 3 candidates, trying to predict where the 4th candidate might be attacked. Robert was confident that his prediction would be correct, so he immediately left with a few officers to the location where the 4th candidate might be killed. They reached a large fountain, where they found a van already parked. When the officers approached the van, they found the same murderer who had killed the other 3 candidates. Without wasting any time, the murderer killed the officers and started drowning the 4th candidate in the fountain's water. By the time Robert reached the scene, the murderer had already fled in his car, but Robert managed to save the fourth candidate. Everyone helped him, and once rescued, the fourth candidate told Robert where he had been hidden. According to him, he had been concealed in a St. Andreas church, where the Illuminati performed their activities. Slowly, Robert started to understand the significance of these old churches. The Illuminati seemed to be choosing places that were ancient and had little foot traffic. Meanwhile, Petra returned to her chamber and discovered that all the research papers of her senior members who had died had been stolen. Later, it was revealed that the commander, Richard, had seized all the papers. When Petra confronted Commander Richard and demanded her research papers back, he clearly stated that the papers were confidential and would not be returned to her. Seeing Commander Richard's behavior, Petra began to suspect that he might be working with the Illuminati. She felt that he was always going against them, which made her even more suspicious. Petra quickly went to Robert to share her concerns, telling him that she believed Commander Richard might be secretly working for the Illuminati. Robert explained everything to Petra, including a clue he had found from the fourth candidate, which led them to the Illuminati members and the murder location. They all went to a very old church where the murder had been planned. The officers spread out to investigate, and they found the murder vehicle, but there was no one inside. After the officers left, Robert and Petra stayed behind. Soon, Robert discovered a secret passage. Unafraid, he and Petra entered the hidden route. In the secret location, they found an Illuminati member preparing for another murder. The member received a message on his laptop stating that his final payment was placed in a car. However, the member soon realized that someone had entered his secret place, so he quickly hid. As Robert and Petra continued exploring, they discovered that the entire place was a base for Illuminati members to plan and execute their operations. They found symbols used for punishment, 4 in total, on the bodies of the murdered candidates. But Robert noticed a fifth symbol that wasn't present yet. It dawned on him that this fifth symbol might be for another priest, one who could be an enemy of the Illuminati. Robert speculated that after eliminating Father McKenna, the fifth candidate might also be marked for a similar fate. While they were discussing this, the murderer suddenly appeared and held them at gunpoint. However, according to his contract, Robert and Petra were not to be killed. So, he let them go but warned them that if they interfered with his plans, he would have no choice but to kill them both. After delivering this threat, the murderer left to continue his work. He got into his car, following the instructions from his message. Suddenly, the entire car exploded, indicating that the murderer, who had been given the command, was killed after completing his task. Meanwhile, Commander Richard was shown in a room with Father McKenna. He had declined all of Father McKenna's permissions and locked the door behind them. Richard was planning, according to his scheme, to kill the fifth member, Father McKenna. Robert and Petra quickly left the place and reached their castle, where they managed to open the doors to Father McKenna's room. To their shock, as soon as they opened the door, they saw Richard with a gun, and he immediately shot Father McKenna, killing him. If Robert and Petra hadn't arrived in time, Father McKenna would have died. They discovered that Commander Richard was also a member of the Illuminati, and Petra had suspected him all along. Another senior member arrived, who didn't trust Father McKenna and was about to move towards him to kill him. However, the officers eliminated that leader as well because they were all part of the Illuminati's internal members, providing information to the senior Illuminati leaders. But the biggest problem was that an antimatter bomb had been hidden in the area, which could explode at any moment. Following the guidance of the officers, Robert and Petra rushed to the bomb's location. When they reached it, Petra realized that the battery of the bomb had almost run out, and due to the cold, a reaction could occur at any time, making it prone to explosion. Petra had almost given up, believing it was impossible to deactivate the bomb. At this point, Father McKenna, in a helicopter, decided to take the bomb to the sky. He believed that by detonating it in the air, no one would be harmed. He placed the bomb in the helicopter and, after reaching a great height, parachuted out. The bomb exploded in the sky, creating a massive vibration wave that wreaked havoc over several kilometers. Although no one lost their life in the explosion, many people were injured. After a while, as things started to return to normal, people began to see Father McKenna as their hero, and they were extremely happy, appreciating his sacrifices. Everyone started believing that Father McKenna had risked his life to save theirs. Father McKenna was also happy to see that the people had made the right decision, and now the leaders would have to follow the people's wishes, or else they could face rebellion. Meanwhile, Robert and Petra were sitting in the research laboratory when, while searching through some evidence stored in a table, Robert found a tablet belonging to an old scientist who had died earlier. When they turned it on, they discovered footage from CCTV cameras showing events when Commander Richard and Father McKenna were in the same chamber. This discovery led Robert and Petra to realize that the true mastermind behind the whole plot was not Commander Richard, but Father McKenna himself, whose sole ambition was to obtain the position of Supreme Leader. He had orchestrated all of these plans, deliberately forcing Commander Richard to kill him so that everyone would think Richard was behind the deaths. Afterward, Father McKenna had the other leaders killed. Robert and Petra shared these recordings with their senior members, which led everyone to believe that Father McKenna's true nature had been exposed. Father McKenna, realizing that he would be caught and tortured for his crimes, chose to end his life by setting himself on fire rather than face imprisonment. The next day, it was announced that the last surviving candidate from the four would be crowned as the Supreme Leader, and they would take charge of the entire city and church. Robert and Petra were thanked immensely for their role in saving the city and ensuring justice. They were happy that their efforts had brought growth and justice to the city. And so, this adventurous story came to an end.